At what point, if there is such a point, do you envisage, assuming the violence escalates, the demonstrators seem to be getting some groove, if you will, the upper hand, at what point would Putin send Russian troops into Ukraine, Fareed?
Oh, I think that would be a complete disaster, and I think Putin knows it. What he's trying to do is exert his control and his influence with very large offers of money. I mean, remember, Putin has up to this point offered $17 billion. When you think about, a country the size of Ukraine, that's an awful lot of money. I think he knows that if he were to send Russian troops into Ukraine, it would mean the end, in some ways, of Russian influence in Ukraine. Already, there's a great danger that Putin may have overplayed his hand. Imagine what Ukrainians are thinking right now about the way in which the Russian government is supporting the president in his crackdown. And you point out 100 dead, hundreds and hundreds more wounded.
The president of the United States, President Obama, as you know, he's warned of, quote, consequences if people step over the line. Now, his critics are saying that's an empty threat, if you will. The U.S., the Obama administration has made similar threats in Syria. Red lines, for example, didn't follow through when the red line was violated. Is this a hollow threat?
It isn't a completely hollow threat, because I think there are things that can be done. Remember, Ukraine is not Syria. They think of themselves, at least in some ways, as European. They want to be part of the modern world. They don't want to be a pariah state. And if you were to talk about how officials, members of the military or police who were to take part in this crackdown would be held personally responsible if we threatened that they were to be put on some kind of a war crimes list, I think that would have a very powerful effect. No Ukrainian general will want to be declared a war criminal. So I think in that sense they have leverage. Look, we're not going to send troops into Ukraine. The Europeans aren't going to send troops into Ukraine. Sanctions are a mixed bag, because you would drive the Ukrainians closer to the Russians. There would be no UN sanctions, since the Russians and the Chinese would not agree. So you have a limited capacity here. The crucial question is still is going to be what the Ukrainian army does, because there are signs, as Nick was saying, that the police and army are getting involved. And if that happens, then we cross a bridge which gets us into a civil war.